MJ's in the bathroom right now, but we'll be good in a minute. One AC was just sent out. Let me know when people are good to go. Everyone good? Zach, you need a second? Cool.
We haven't gotten it. Berkeley emails are slow.
That's fair. Awesome. The Advantage of Sustainable Development Button is used executive orders to focus on increasing solar and wind energy to signal the U.S.'s commitment to sustainable development goals, but a successful water management and financing executed international domestic SDG successes for 2021. Button rejoined Paris applications on the environmental policies and Trump 31 new measures in 28 proposals and protect the environment and price of renewables of health in 2021 that are recommended solar and wind produced up to 62% of new electric capacity coupled in 2019 and 76% in 2020. Solar accounted 37% of new power that went for 33.2% of gas. 13.7 wind solar less expected to cause a continued fall to the water resources that are diminishing due to drought and need to improve the cooperative water management scale up and investment which underpins all international sustainable development. Scenario 1 is energy security, pursuing SDGs using effective water governance strategies opens up pathways to invest in clean energy. Otherwise, domestic renewables are doomed to fail. That's Smith and Matthews 19. Water is separate from climate change that ever water that water management vehicle for ensuring coherence among SDGs and parts of the unless coherence is explicitly considered like governing among sectors pursuing 2030 agenda that integrate climate and water policies, strengthen coherence, integrated water and climate finance, limit our green growth. The renewables are uniquely key to U.S. energy security post the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's again 22. A conflict like fossil fuels, if we heat the warning, could be less than expanded renewable energy will increase our energy security with the right policy that clean energy provided. Most energy needs no one country owns the sun or wind. Removing fossil fuels must be priority. Energy independence must mean clean renewable energy. The energy independence key to sustaining alliances and preventing other countries from leveraging U.S. reliance. Law 19. Great powers love and again enter the new era competition and play an important role down in the energy market, financial security, trade, and Russia pose a competition. All three factors important important role and reliable energy influence energy info, but the action Middle East, China, Russia, and Europe, but the disrupt from global stream, great powers are looking to spend their reach to achieve strategic energy belief world, from great powers competition opened up Arctic and Africa. The energy conflicts escalate. The extinction holds seen 20. Even side escalate and energy conflict could go forward that attacks just devastating nuclear power capable WD sudden breakdown in nuclear war instability, disrupted infrastructure and energy crisis, and proof of point to war. Scenario 2 is bilateral leadership. Both the U.S. and China have signaled commitment to SDGs. However, financing the U.S.'s part is key to increase Chinese participation, borrowing and creating a cooperative model between the two countries. It's more 17. SDGs any considerable leadership depend on the U.S. and China working concert to quit financing record leadership in the U.S. and China as bilateral investors and shareholders. So other effort China's role remains modest that SDG serves as an anchor for both and countries to pursue any partnership. Any U.S. financing ambition would be welcomed by Chinese citizens that have been calling for expansion for some time. Apple's major should be China's role and be lending China contribute to SDG goals so that directly achieving progress within China. U.S.-China collaboration driven by SDGs that addresses food, energy, water, and access challenges that swing at all 21. In the face of increasing climate change, SDG highlights the lack of practice related to FDW research and breakthrough in FDW that China and U.S. and unique position to engage in solutions addressing FEW that are facilitated by transdisciplinary collaboration that advance underpinnings that understanding FEW research that conservative the U.S. and China share objectives and challenges regarding FEW that have similar protecting conservative FEW resources both attempt to increase water use and use efficiency and improve water quality that successful implementation of solutions requires inclusion of stakeholders that consumers cooperate provide clean water and sufficient energy that instead of thinking the U.S. and China's competitors FEW was better achieved if two countries work in partnership. Water scarcity undermines Chinese economic development, but the plan spills over successful management that shifted all 15. Water energy nexus shortages country development. Water is at the heart of the constraints how China gets bigger. Water is a challenge that developments in the U.S. could offer valuable insight for China policy development promise for collaboration. The U.S. and Chinese governments have like behind it engaging in research challenges. Bilateral collaboration should be integrated. Chinese economic growth is reliant on water energy and food. China's water resources undervalued. Demand will exceed supply by 2030. CCP economic decline leads to multiple scenarios for war. That's Carpenter 15. Economic source affirmation military behavior that change in degree of public discontent will surface and need to distract public and pull Chinese leaders to adopt or then policies as he said, nothing confrontation with the crisis in Taiwan that would be serious since the U.S. has obligated itself instead of Chinese leaders to take uncompromising stands and cock a few to come from Chinese people back. Goes nuclear, Talmud 18. Russian Taiwan feeling fears expansion and threatened allies and influence. Russian military the confrontation against Taiwan no longer seems implausible. China has an interwrinkled conventional force in the U.S. Turning China's conventional forces would threaten nuclear arsenal and lead to use nukes consequences devastating. Thus, plan the federal government to increase the protected water resources in the United States by through the framework established by the Sustainable Development Goals. So, method of the one AC is good. Debates over what U.S. policymakers should do and what their assumptions are in regards to China are vital to successfully engaging China and navigating complex international issues. It's 420. Plus, debate suggests that consensus might not be well formed. What objective plan that assumptions should drive U.S. strategy past years China debates are if UN systems center of gravity require consensus on how the U.S. will defend its own role. Policy debates need to move beyond unhelpful that focus on the primary alignment choices towards a deeper dialogue about the practical challenges need to candidly assess friction points delineating between competitive and cooperative aspects of relations with Beijing. Xi and the CCP would pursue territorial expansion and resource shortage scenario. Taiwanese and U.S. military retooling provides a unique window of escalation. That's Branson Beckley 21. Growth of given region that the city's global part of China's military now sense of real chance of winning war that she is now pushing certain sovereignty over Taiwan, the ASEAN, and other disputed areas of control in the U.S. From the 1970s to 2010 was nearly self-sufficient in food, water, and energy resources. However, China's rights that's all the China's running out of resources and water scarce and importing energy and food, more energy and food than any other nation that China will be sorely tempted to use for itself. Taiwan questions its own terms on its own terms before Washington Taipei can retool their military. CCP securitized energy and water because it's fundamental to party stability and economic development. Energy policy, national discourse, and military innovations prove that Zahu 22. 2007 energy policy mentions as an important aspect of economic security. Energy security has a direct bearing on national security and social stability. For recent official discourse and policy further demeans that securitization in China that develops only the way for first of all for its survival. That just rapidly evolving national security discourse that climate security implications for militarizes trends hydropower policies, particularly in context of China-India competition over water issues. The evolving discourse in what national security that development issue drove CCP to underscore the strategic importance of water. That BRA is a clear example of securitization water and energy sector to accelerate the economy. That chance of understanding for resources, land, water, and energy militarizes development processes as nationalist ideas as discourse and has successfully been employed by influential political leaders to securitize development. Imagining nuclear war is an effective Purdian strategy that challenges overcomes its epistemic falsities and nuclear biases. Its Palpatine's 20. Nuclear war that either accidental or deliberate that make the parts of the planet uninhabitable, like it's been affected with the US, that only a few taken seriously. Three, their epistemic practical inconsistencies, students imagine futures avoid survivability by knowing it's governing nuclear futures ultimate act comparison the lines and predicting we recreate expert and contemplating instead of reproducing overcompenses over responsibility to start identifying overcompenses imagined futures deliberation and imagined dates and but says to re-engage in normativity need to be that overcompenses sculptured by such accidental dangers committing risk is productive. That's Kurosawa 4. Trying to analyze what may occur countries that the images of crystal balls, what is stubborn in the breaches of risk management, and neither evasion nor fatalism will do with the endeavors are central for the expecting ideas about the possible futures that transcend the existing affairs that are dystopian imagery, lights and publics and construction management with the future given the medical given the crisis of nuclear ecological apocalypse avoidance crisis on everyone's lips that it's something imaginary and can label novel form of action that can be turned perfect foresight is dialogical process of address. Mark the card at address. I will send it out with the mark.
Wait, which card did you mark? We can
The
start cross.
Kurosawa card.
Okay.
I'm like in the process of the email now,
Yeah.
so I think it's probably just better if I.
As soon as you send it, we can start.
Yeah. Okay. It's up.
All right. Cool. Where's my timer? It's in my bag. Right here. Okay. And here it is. Okay. The US-China commitment to SDGs cooperation. Where does the evidence like actually say they'll cooperate with one another? Like, where does it make like a causal claim that will happen?
Yeah, sure. So there are a couple of pieces of evidence that indicate that. The Zwang evidence says that they're in unique positions to cooperate, and that they both have sort
Where
of.
does that say they will? Like, US and China have been in positions to do a lot of good things, and they haven't.
Yeah, you can look to the Morris evidence for that. It talks about how, in terms of questions of financing,
Yeah, the Morris
China's
evidence
asked
says
for
that it
U.S. cooperation
wait,
on
wait.
it.
The Morris evidence is speculative. It says that they should cooperate. Where does it make like those causal claims that you're talking
No,
about?
in the middle of the card, it talks about how new U.S. financing ambition in the context of MDBs would be welcomed by the Chinese government since they have been calling for an expansion for some time. So
They've been calling of an expansion of SDGs. Where have they been calling on the US to cooperate with them?
They've been.
Okay, cool.
The entire thesis of MDBs is about lending to China.
Okay.
They've asked for the US
the
to
Sahu
do that
evidence. I'm confused like what that gets you. Is realizing the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation good?
We haven't made a descriptive
That's a
claim that it is
from the
good
card.
or bad. We've said that China does securitize. We've made a claim that China securitizes the specific resources that we've talked about, and we've made an impact scenario based off why.
Okay, let's
that
talk
would cause
about
conflict if they have resource shortages.
Let's talk about one of your other impact scenarios, the Holstein card. It's about energy conflict, and then you didn't highlight in the region. The whole card is referencing like Russia. It's about Euro energy crisis and tensions between NATO and Russia. How do you solve that kind of a crisis?
That's not true. NATO and Russia is an example.
It's like specifically talking about that specific region. Where does it apply that to the US at all? Can you find a place in the card that applies it to the US?
I mean, it's making a descriptive claim about
Okay, cool. So
like
you can't.
energy conflicts. Also,
Debates.
NATO includes the
Wait.
US.
I have another
so
question.
obviously
I have
that
another
would
question.
include
Yeah,
the
but it's
US.
about conflicts in the region of Eastern Europe. That's fine. Debates over should are good. So like we can't say Congress won't do the F. Like we can't read a bunch of cards about that.
Um,
I'm assuming not, right?
we don't think that that's a reason not to vote F.
Okay, cool. So it's not like a point of negation of the affirmative. The argument that you make about actually, I guess I'll ask another question. Is there like a precedent at all for like US Chinese cooperation over something like this? Like have we cooperated with China on stuff like this before?
Yeah, there's been limited cooperation in the context of the
What
SDGs,
examples?
like forming the SDGs. So like forming the institutions of things like MDBs.
Like what institutions?
Things like MDBs.
Okay.
That is an example that the Morris evidence cites at least.
One off, no case.
Sure. All right. Just get a thumbs up when everyone's good. All right. Is anyone not good? Jake, Jake, are you good? I think it's gonna thumbs up. Okay, great.
One is these politics are those of the Green New Deal, part and parcel of the broader structure of global inequality sustained by via ecological unequal change, the imperialist exploitation of low-wage workers and peripheral nations to benefit wealthy core ones through global labor arbitrations. Leader after trades also manifests as the transfer of physical wealth in the form of natural resources that drives ecological crisis. Global South are PM 19 capitalism maintained by global political institutions such as the IMF, World Bank, the WTO, secured by military forces, the wealthiest, most developed countries, NATO, allies, and mechanism accumulation of wealth in developed countries, equal exchange. One country doing the exchange of low workers' income, the other is high workers' income value, produce the first transfer, and the second international trade technology. Capital to same mobility, another workers to mobility limited by state border generating profits, forming international needs. Equipment makes poor state productivity, third world, the same value made by poor country workers, the same as made by rich country workers, source of poverty, the capitalist system, the salary and work of the rich country, the worker, the poor country makes unequal exchange of goods, also applies ecological unequal exchange. Wealthy countries export pollution to poor countries. Every produced iPad takes 15 kilograms of ore, 300 liters of water, disposal to be 3 kilograms of carbon dioxide. iPad produced in the US every product costs 190 more production. iPad each country meets the country clear the better pollution, but also costs accumulation. There are 2 minutes. Apple's over the product also consumer the wealthy ranges against the product that way. Promotes value global intervention. The safe and trade relations means that the rest will impose the green solution on the rest of the world. The British share this proper goes to share of those in the multi policy ecological with direct consequences of political economic order. Renewables are fossil fuels plus adding a renewable component to existing infrastructure. Their suggestion is not do away with current energy practices, but does reinsure the same systems about capitalist funds and appropriation structures used by oil industries while functioning off a global, unequal, and unstable patterns of resource consumption. John Locke, with this fossil fuels, renewable energies, mass continuous social left degradation, renewable energy fuels, and fossil fuel resource kind of sides of national resource interaction combines hard conventional warfare, such as shooting, fire, control strategy designed to display. These include preemptive targeting to enforce capitalist political economy, renewable energy, fossil plus against the energy production, renewable commodity energy, just more attractive to fossil fuel energy, electricity generation. This increases with the increase in decarbonization, given stage of mining parts to requires fossil mining, housing, where minerals to be, wind turbines, many of the minerals from China with energy, policy, ecology, destructive mining that produce waste containing heavy metals, and active bodies going to air, water, soil bodies, construction, infrastructure development, waste, established political communities, spreading ecosystems, banks, green economy, expanding demand for restructured mining, where minerals be directions will be applied to power and build infrastructure, available structures, hydrocarbon industries beginning use renewable energy to legitimize restructure the renewable energy extraction nexus being used in the spread of the capitalist infrastructure later based on extreme hydrocarbon high mineral extraction that found industrial systems destroying the landscapes of population the service ideologies control mass consumption renewable energy entails intensive relation to domination fossil fuel plus system social ecological affirmative as well as large amounts of waste only made socially income invisible in poor rural and indigenous territories of the world displaced fossil global aspects fossil use extreme moral alliance against anyone who might protest a set up a combination of resources for sustainable takes place in Africa, a place which with those with the same resources, palladium, platinum, gold, low concept on lithium, all requires great renewable tech. The new terrain of interventions not oil, but the technology, SpaceX, and solar, which creates rampant escalation. By 16, this new planet will be planted in Africa, proceeded to the place for planetary futures. As thinking that's among experts that Africa represents the last frontier, capitals of 9 billion, foreign direct investment is 2 billion, 40% country continents people live in cities, proportion larger than India's current African abundance, acceleration towards capitalism, simply random collective disconnect on places together, which I form the multi order boards, organized metal free, and orbital land, and much rich 10% of oil, 40% of gold, 40% of new pellet, more land discovered credit now of the Department of Agriculture, Chinese capitalism being survived in Africa, Chinese entry Africa is the largest driven by state Chinese managers, you supported Workers acceleration climate small race in the sharper first content central global environment crisis host of those solution conversation capacity America Africa biotech is one of the essential elements climate controls for the vast potential ecology renewable energies have caused new rules require rare earth mineral extraction which is unstable breeds international conflict group that 21 rare earth metals are used to generate renewable energy wind turbine magnetic signals skill from smartphones about itself used in electric vehicles spending rare earth metals with all land use exploration environmental damage they are mine using energy intensive carbon emission the atmosphere countries with the most rare earth metals occurring in China and the US because of efficient renewable technologies of nations pursuing renewable technologies intensive and generally not so with other nation aims at controlling their stages for global renewable uses. They are wrong about cooperative tactics in the US and China renewable intent is part of imperial power grappling Goku 21 Lord Bank Kuwait challenge software empire the US and shark bank deploying political self-regard Syria Chinese strategic ambitions of the United States government and surrogate for American network infrastructure stuck in the middle towards you clothing digital future control network technology involves not codes for the politics matter which will be suited to concentrated orchestration of action so combined American national security state funds child by ranking solar just as California ideology some government globalization tech by first science in California counter those hackers computers politics and art to provide short parallel global ambitions the Chinese deeply demand for China's history there's no more than sovereign control global information just the Cold War the policy of containment so too is now emerging Cold War data war China's first stage to involved contributing alliance of willing nations virtually committed not to deploying China digital installation United States engaged in the ruin of armaments and technology found the traditional weaponry which that's the involvement of inventing powerful cycle west which will shape the future rare earth metals as the competition US and China and pure powers pay money 21 rare the first of items in the society markets where down which have the world's major economies previously over dependent China's ability to block rare earth exports to USA Africa's opportunity emerging production regions therefore intensive competition between global metals African continents home to numerous rare earth deposits against size factor China's dominance and global reform was clear political will develop the United States more than anyone else to minimize vulnerability to China European Union to China head start Africa the United States the US will therefore have to understand that reducing Chinese dominant sector is not going to be easy extinction problems 21 attention to direct political contradiction the accumulation of legitimacy friction national China and rest over China US and Chinese cooperation deeply cross the attempt to lead a war like the national legitimacy is like central because of the rest of nuclear war the drive for unequal consumption is proven violent civilization model of slavery conquest dominance must change the violent social relations or during extinction of community crisis allowing the extinction to reflex planetary energy, food, financial crises, underneath naval conquest, imperialism, slavery, research, reaction, research, West, Brown, financial simulation, consumption, growth, of pineapple. This has something to global south, globalization would not be possible without coloniality. So the elite jumping their own indigenous minority population, modernizing development, and catching up with the emerging economies and crash course, increasing wealth, attention, resulting global cash, between accumulation and penetrative rising complex over research, proliferation, global alternative monetization, overshooting Earth's carrying capacity, gross overconsumption, humanity, equal to 1.5 planets, ecological energy, overconsumption, waste, overdeveloped countries, everyone would live like US 55 Earth is ecologically unstable, consumption causing crisis, energy scarcity, depletion, energy, essential minerals and water peak oil occurred in 2025. The absolute water series predicted rise 50% monocropping industrial economies scalable to show biodiversity carbon seeds and just methods global local economies produce more industries for generate better fight climate change expanding global equality coupled with the percent of poverty now spamming continuous growth there's issues and we need more growth but we have increasing concentration of all-time growth contribution rate with top 80% countries 80% global with the global job system and disconnect is growing ecological death racialized indigenous communities are run disease globalization resulting commodity-based industrial lifestyles while communicable diseases malaria and call alternatives to orient politics versus collective movement anti-colonial degrowth. It's not just economic shift, but rewiring of colonial relations between global north and south, which is the only way to produce de-enclosure and decommodification, reverse ecological breakdown. That's Equal 21 high significant appropriation of global south through ecological through illegal exchange, including temple 1 billion tons of raw materials and 379 billion hours in body labor per year. Green growth requires enormous and material objectives of the global south. Eco scholars, activists call for anti-colonial countries to provision release south to capture the climate change and globalization lines crucial for successful development. South catch up is possible alternative convergence through pushing decline and north sustainable levels of peace south to human needs. Human needs is converted to a level consistent with ecological space, universal human welfare. Realize circles like capitals, decolonial frontiers where nature labor nature can be taken close to feed cost peaks. So couple things should be clonable, clean. European capitalists they cast nature's option exploiting the category of nature. They should not only not be also black indigenous people and women by security courses were there that were leveraged their achieved lives others taking growth of literature used today. Dean Court calls for economy organized or interference human needs through disclosure, decolonization needs to be strong beyond the social movements, global south and people's giving talk about it, directed by thousands of aggressive organization call for rich and address the ecological data about just movements such as Japanese or Rohab and the food sovereignty, but although which have roots in global south, the growth call and activity is aligned with these movements, energy, resource use high, and combination housing accessible to crime and poverty distributing, well, income and wealth more filling, expanding public goods, relegating impact scenarios to the realm of formal pluralism, obscures massive and interconnected existential with caused by the sort of dynamics and flows of clarity, and sort of other versions of the formal and plural historical dialectical organic with conceptualization under the history, religion, subject, object, the political latitude, with compass ideology, quarter bias, the forward that would take the state, but excluding falsification of accuracy, the capital manifest and dominant theory, is the heretical propagator of ideas to make the world what it is, criticizing self-unity China on the basis of abstract human rights, overloads the purpose and essay, the expansion forward, debating cross-world cultural facts, to hosting truth further, justifies new imperialist aggressions, issues not believing patriots citing cannot be left unexamined for substitution, violence, force, underappreciation of the weight of Western ideology, working class from one, were dismissed by empirical study, including historical aging, until the system phenomenon explaining the phenomenon explain the agency of these class politics, expect to be like collision is related to externality to be dealt with. It doesn't turn out.
Market internality.
Cool. Are you good?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. The Croker and Croker evidence, what in this evidence do you think indicates that cooperation over SDGs in the context of the US and China is impossible?
Yeah, so our argument is that China and the US actually have overlapping interests in things like technological development, right? It makes a broader thesis as to the way that capitalism intersects with technology. If you want to look to how that specifically applies to things like renewables, sustainable development, you can look at the card about fossil fuels plus, but we're talking about Croker. Croker's argument is that this kind of jostling over who controls the technological future, specifically in the context of things like sustainability, right? It's literally a question of the future of how society will organize its technology, right? Creates a kind of like rivalry between the US and China that is economic,
Okay.
but spills
yeah,
into its ideological
So
position.
you've read a
makes-
card that's like there's a technological rivalry between the US and China. Where have you read a card that says that cooperation can't resolve the like conflict that results from that rivalry?
Because the first card we read is about how capitalist imperial powers, right? They offshore kinds of production, right? That's all in
Okay,
order to
yeah,
secure their
let's talk
own
about that then.
interests of
The
infinite
app is about-
accumulation,
Yeah, no,
which
that
means
makes
that like
sense.
imperial powers cooperating is structurally impossible.
Let's talk about that, like externalizing that like extraction. The app is about resolving domestic water management.
Yeah, I mean, our
why does
argument
that
is
result
that
in
everything
exporting?
domestic, our argument is that everything domestic is actually international. The thesis of unequal exchange in the context of like traditional kind like Marxist economics is about labor power, right? So the idea that like the commodities that we consume here actually are a result of a kind of like undervalued labor in the third world. We offshore ecological responsibility for production onto nations in the
Sure.
global south, right?
That
This
makes
is
sense.
applied to things like sustainable
Robinson
development goals
evidence?
by the
What's
first
the
card.
internal link to it?
The Membe card and the card above the Robinson card, which is all about how the like kind of mineral mining that you result in because of sustainable development goals in Africa causes US Chinese escalation in Africa over one like ecological biotopes for things like carbon sequestration and planting of like trees to sequester carbon, and two, mineral resources to actually create the sustainable technology that you're talking about. That's why the Croker evidence is so important, because we have made a thesis as the way that capitalism intersects with technology such that like China and the US are both extremely invested in controlling that future, which means cooperation is inevitable, but conflict is in the world of the AF.
Cooperation isn't inevitable?
No, cooperation. Oh, wait,
Isn't
no,
it?
cooperation is impossible, but
Impossible.
conflict
Okay.
is
Yeah,
inevitable.
that makes sense.
Sorry, those I words trip me up sometimes.
We'll take a little bit of prep. 10 minutes starting now. stopped at 8:01. I'll put that in the chat. Okay, I'm sending it out. Order is case the K. Could I get a thumbs up from everyone once they've gotten it? Cool. Okay. Burke Prep, are y'all good? Oh, okay, Brendan needs it too. Okay. Sorry, I like looked away for 10 seconds. Burke Prep, are y'all good? Okay. Y'all are still waiting on it, or?
Yeah, we're still waiting on it. While we're waiting on it, I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
Okay. Okay. Have y'all gotten it? If not, I should probably try sending it out again at this point. Cool. I'm gonna start in like 5 seconds then, unless y'all need like a second more to get flow and everything. Seems like you're all right, cool. Case adherence to the SDGs is key to effective renewable investment that replaces oil production and creates a cooperative model between the U.S. and China that enables Chinese growth and prevents extinction. I prefer explanation for why China lashes out. That's Brandon Beckley say that the CCP lash out is uniquely more absent or more likely absent cooperation because China fears a non-cooperative U.S. may work with Taiwan to develop a more advanced military response to incentivizing China to invade Taiwan before it's too late. Carpenter says that they only escalate in a situation of resource scarcity because China has a bargain with their own people where they increase nationalism if they can't maintain economic stability. Makes a try or die af, which they've implicitly agreed with by reading a China's impact that they agree that's an impact that should be weighed. But even so, extinction is a distinct phenomenon that requires prior consideration. Berkedal 16. Mass extinction, qualitatively different phenomenon that demands own ethical categories, not just erase life and their histories and possibilities, depends on ontological additions to life they imagine to need to plan a comprehensive negation. Mass extinction until it fails to recognize the reality which is a matter of being, not being, at one of life and death. The world's derived from intersection of diverse points to be there and take not static or permanent there, permanent people and fluid concepts of violence that focus only on humans, ignore the destruction which undermines the conditions of plurality that enables life to thrive. The K framework, weigh the after permits competitive opportunity cost alternative, reduce the problems outlined. Once predictability and error interpolates and negative monopoly via unpredictable focus shift that moots when I see obviates clash and dex fairness. Second is comparative solution to politics are good. Diagnosing a problem without a proposal, just without understanding the nuances, benefits, competing strategies. Three is debates and shape subject should be school, media, family, community, all that way. Other ends up the impact and figures just rewrite blocks or get angry at judges. Four consequences must be evaluated. Isaac 2, control more goodness undercuts political responsibility, fails to see intention not sure the achievements hard to view, serving any more good beyond the clean conscience supporters politics much about unintended consequences, the effects of action, no significance. Important as pursuing effects of pragmatic ways are moral solutions undermines political effectiveness. The first piece of RNFP evidence, just as capitalism is bad, but growth is sustainable and parallel data produce health environmental concerns. Bailey 16, global fertility rates been decelerating, population will peak unlikely our physical limits will be exceeded, productivity is improving, more efficient photosynthesis boosts yields by 50%, everything except information is peaking, humanity to peak farm with water uses peaks in line below 1970 years to achieve absolute decoupling for plastic, paper, aluminum, steel, and relative for 50 commodities, 30% reduced needs by 90% material recycled, the entire world energy needs to be supplied by 6,000 plants, the fast reactors supply 1,000 years, and a plethora of indicators demonstrate that catastrophic climate change can be averted. Well, 21, thanks to rapid ethical revolution of renewable energy and global politics, expectation of 3 degrees pledges bring us closer to 2 shaped if you not much time that nations have made ambitious pledges to the future action decarbonization come to seem rational solar power the cheapest in history was 1/10 the stimulus spending already committed directed toward decarbonization sufficient to deliver Paris and stop warming below 2 degrees raises solar fall ninefold as has lithium batteries oil demand emissions peak this year. Those net zero pledges more ambitious in Paris were made by China than pledges of restrictive full half degree from Biden's pledge. You got 2/3 of the mission committed aggressive timeline. Keeping well below 2.5 degrees looks like a walk in the park and 2-degree target yield a longer timeline without even the help of negative emissions. And India and China emissions outweigh and alternative causes war. That's brand 21. So growth make it harder to keep the public happy, fearing up people leaders desperately grab resources, making nationalism a crutch for wood regime. The U.S. economic surge ended the imperial expansion. Russia fell into its slump and occupied Manchuria, facing slowdown. Putin invaded countries. The June lab evidence says renewables are bad, but one winning DMAT solves this. That's Bailey. And second, waste recycling significantly reduce the environmental impact of REMs. It's true. Theodol 20 method for processing waste recycling strategies. Resource circulation society may discuss has several advantages: low toxic gas emission, clear waste generation, low operating costs, and clean extraction, high yielding, high purity rare earth metal or metal compounds. This is the impulse for filling day to minute pure earth. 3, no exportation to the global south. Recycling salts and mines don't exist there. The Mubembe evidence. 1, this is about a shift to Africa that's inevitable for external reasons. The AF does not implicate. Second, this doesn't solve case though. We don't read a warming impact, which is the only warrant. If they articulate a new reason in the blog as to why it's a link to the affirmative, we'll answer new in the 1A, or we'll get answers new in the 1AR. The Gupta evidence. This is REM's bad, which I answered about. The Kyoto evidence is really good, and it's about how sustainable practices will be able to replace the harmful ones in REM mining, even if you don't buy that. The Bailey evidence shows that dematerialization solves. The Kroger and Croker evidence says that cooperation fails. China or in the U.S. can influence each other's water management strategies, specifically through the context of SDGs. HEDL 20. U.S. and China faces similar water management problems, linkages, water resource policies being accepted globally. Despite the programs, we are still facing challenges in SDGs that press effective water resources management, institutional relationships, support, efforts to achieve responsible consumption, nation working together to goals and benefits from knowing experiences of other studies, such water resource recommendations such as China, the U.S. institutional foundation, efficiency, and sustainability, contributing shared experience by comparing water resource management policies, offering policy recommendations, shed light on water resource management. Help achieve SDGs. SDG technology brings people together in collaboration to confront global challenges. About 19, digital technologies are powerful. 2, second, have transformational effect on SDGs. Digital technologies can galvanize our efforts to confront massive challenges we face globally. Digital technologies have significant tangible effects on the world. Digital access, faster internet, the cloud, internet of things, IoT, cognitive, digital reality, and the blockchain can help in connecting citizens around the world, supporting and monitoring, tracking human impacts on the environment, optimizing inefficient energy-intensive industrial processes, and augmenting actions that people carry on, support sustainable goals. Digital technology and help predict the biosphere and reverse negative effects of monitoring, tracking the state of the natural world and analyzing and optimizing energy material usage across sectors, minimize climate change, digital technologies, and help contribute to sustainable, equitable, and inclusive societies. Opportunities include connecting to unconnected and vulnerable with the cloud's computing power to accelerate drug and crop development and address strategy related to poverty and hunger, disaster impact, and education and healthcare. There are no structural barriers to cooperation. Their arguments are based on the mindset of leaders which can be changed. It's Copel 99. Global politics is guided by shared ideas held by actors to redefine their interests, the identities by interacting agents, co-determine each other's structure, produced by discursive practices, allows a constructivist to challenge realism agents of social will can change structure, they can anticipate or emancipate themselves as critically recognized and actors' realities, rhetorically constructing contingent. SDGs as framework incentivizes cooperation. OECD 21. SDGs offer a holistic framework that has potential to guide our collective action. Sustainable development goals serve as a common standard to coordinate efforts as a common framework with SDGs along with their targets and indicators help overcome the current fragmentation, lack of coordination, and work hard at coordination. The next evidence card is about arguments that cause warming. U.S. China war causing extinction. One, we solved this. It's a Morris evidence. Yeah, prevents war with China by increasing multilateral cooperation. Second, recycling dematerialization solved competition concerns. The Helen and Lindgren evidence group that one, everything under capitalism good answers. The second, economic growth increase the quality of life. One, 20, living standards dramatically risen, better farming, food production, eliminated disease, capitalism, most successful economic system, greater social security, more jobs, workers. Excuse me. Do you mind if I get a Kleenex real quick? Here, sorry. That was so gross. Okay, sorry about that. I have 158 left. Does anyone disagree? I'm just going to restart 120. Sorry, I had to sneeze for like the last 2 minutes. That's why I was like touching my face weirdly. Second, economic growth increased the quality of life. 120, living standards dramatically risen, better farming, food production, eliminated diseases, capitalism, most successful economic system, greater social security, more jobs, workers fulfilling dual jobs, automated, dramatically reduced child mortality rates, vastly increased lifespan, innovative nature, capitalism, funded foster screening, medical IDs. The average life was 64 and 73 in the Soviet Union compared to 71 70 in the U.S. The capitalism enabled the U.S. mobilize efficiently, allocate resources, skyrocket education, skills, information, social mobility, extreme poverty is global 6,000 or 60,000 people are escaping extreme poverty every day. Capitalism is the cause of poverty, rather the lack of capitalism. Every degree of growth matters. Slow recovery increase the populist conflict. 140 years of data proves Petrocus 21, hope will grow faster, slow recovery coincide with nativist population when growth falters, bad things happen in the studies, financial crisis 1870 to 2014, research found after a severe crisis, voters attracted to the extreme right, blame minorities or foreigners, this equates to 30% increase in the vote of far right parties causes. Suggesting in populist psychology crisis, the causes content this activated populist attitudes. The alt one perm to the Afro-Orient politics for the collective movement in decolonial growth. The alt becomes the Afro can overcome the squo. Two alt must have an actor in a text and only see anything else is unpredictable because alt shiftiness that makes perms and alt solvency impossible to answer. Three, nobody joins the alt 21. Degrowth impossible. Everyone except the few Twitter actors is going to reject degrowth profiting most need to commit 86 to income to reduce political suicide of many people accept declines the living standards and non-stutter reduction, housing and food transportation, medical care not having the Kadari evidence impressed by Isaiah's consequentialism does form cost benefit analysis. Three scenario to do scenario analysis pedagogically valuable. Barbell 16. Sorry. Research for policy making and hints communication. Only one competitive generation is the state of research program that are policy relevant, circling little attention paid to techniques for generating policy relevant ideas. Scenario analysis is typically seen as a policy tool, not inherently limited to these uses. Scenario analysis there just supposed encourages an expected combination in order to articulate expressing a possible future scenario. Scenario analysis based on expert prediction or simulation, the prediction of possible future states of the world, the ability of decision makers to imagine discounting use constraint existing mental moods map exacerbated by group thinking, confirmation bias, Mark Carter confirmation bias. The below this evidence impacts us out because nuclear war is something that goes underestimated. So it's good to talk about. Let me get one more Kleenex and I'm good for cross-ex. You run them? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm good for cross-ex.
You're good? All right, no problem. All right. Why does communicating risks matter so much if debate doesn't state subjectivity?
Yeah, it's just like an even if you win that statement. Obviously, we don't think there's like an external impact to
Even
the
if
round.
then
We think
how?
it's
So which one will you defend as a prior question? Are you going to say your first line of defense is that debate doesn't shape subjectivity at all?
yeah. Our first answer is that debate doesn't
That's-
shape subjectivities.
That's not like
in
an
the
even
world
if
in
statement.
which
That's
you
like
win,
totally
it does.
contradictory statements.
Okay, it's not contradictory. It's like an even if statement. Even if you win, debate is able to shape our
The
subjectivities. We think it
GOT
is
card.
Mhm.
The GOT card.
It's just we win under your
where do
interpretation.
blades go after they are used up?
Where did
Like
what
for wind
go?
turbines? Yeah, where do they go?
Wind turbines, Jyoti says we can recycle them. It's specifically talking about how the RE is
How?
within the blades.
How?
There's like a chemical process. I will try to find the like exact name
What
of it.
about your
but
app like mandates this like new chemical process that this card is outlining? Like it's
two
just like
things.
theoretically.
One, Jyoti just says it's being adopted writ large because it's cheaper. Bailey also says that we're able to
Who's adopting it?
people who use REEs, like the renewable industry in the military. It's just
Okay,
people who use REEs. They're incentivized because it's cheaper, which is supported by the Bailey evidence that says that dematerialization is going to solve these
Cheaper.
concerns because we can 3D print the REEs or replace them with other things.
3D print.
Second, the Sustainable
Okay.
Development Goals incentivize this because the Morris evidence says that we would like use financial institutions to put money towards like adopting more like environmentally friendly technologies.
The
You have to
heat
just like
card.
funnels money into
The
it.
heat card just says that U.S. and China have similar problems in regards to this. But where does it identify the incentive? And this is also like goes with like the OECD card. It just says like you tagged like it incentivizes SDGs incentivize cooperation, but it's just like a generic thing about SDGs. It's not specific to US and China at all.
Two things. One, the Morris evidence definitely does say that China is literally asking for the U.S. to cooperate with them over SDGs. They just want the U.S. to also give them money to the planned fiat, so it solves those concerns. But I also think you're underselling the he card. The bottom of the card definitely does conclude that these two countries are able to share with each other what they're learning.
It just says it's no, like the he card just says the article itself has contributed to the sharing experiences by making policy recommendations. It does not say that the U.S. and China will be doing this. It's just a speculative
we think
claim
the
about how
plan
they can
leads
share.
to
It doesn't say that
increase
China would do
the
it.
Morris evidence leads to increased cooperation between the U.S. and China because China wants the U.S. to cooperate with them. The plan just solves the issue of that cooperation, which is that the U.S. isn't the status quo. He says that it spills over to other
on
things
this claim will
because it
just be
builds
like we'll just bank all of this Morris card that China is asking
No,
for the
we
US
think
to
the
do
bottom
this.
of he also supports this. It shows
The
that it's able to
bottom
spill
of
over
he
to
doesn't
other
say
things.
anything about what you just said. What do you think the
Obviously,
bottom
we
of
have
he
a
says?
disagreement about what the card says. I think it's very good. I get you're not going to like concede that in cross-ex, but like I think these two pieces of evidence do substantiate what we're saying.
Okay, that's fine. You taking prep? Starting prep. We have 9:18 left.
I sent out a marked copy of the 2AC, by the way, just so everyone has that.
It's the K with the overview. Oh wait, I don't think Kev, who is that? Kevin K. Hearn.
I'm here.
Okay. I was like blocked, so I wasn't sure if it was Tab or K. Hearn who wasn't here. Okay. Yeah, overview, then 2AC straight down. I'll be pretty clear where I am. It's probably the least techie cap K debate you'll ever judge. All right.
Wait, sorry. Is there no doc?
I don't think I'm reading cards.
Okay, cool.
Oh, I lied. I'm reading cards. I forgot. It is the cap K debate. Okay.
Sounds good.
Let me just send those out. I need 2 cards. Is it like I don't know if it's ethical to send them in the body. Not ethical, but like, is that allowed? Can I do that? I know we don't send cards.
How many cards?
I mean, how many? Yeah.
2, and one of them is already in the 1AC.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And the other one is already in the 1MC actually. All right. Just let me know when people are ready. Everyone good? All right, cool. Unequal exchanges, the neo-colonial consequence of capitalist economics played out on a global scale. International trade configures a mechanism of exploitation where wealthy core nations use low wages in the global south to boost their own living standards and consumption by importing cheap commodities at a price far below their actual labor value. Unequal exchanges not only of money but also of physical resources. This is how we apply this Marxist theory to ecological exchange. The global north consumes at an unsustainable rate fossil fuel, minerals, and water extracted in the global south. Exports pollution and ecological breakdown back to those poor nations. An iPad would cost $200 more without unequal burden of ecological effects. This shift of burdens onto the third world produces a permanent state of underdevelopment that should be the filter for how you think about SDGs, because it's also written into their sustainable framework. Sustainable growth in the 21st century is dependent on rigging global south economies in favor of extractive projects that destroy the infrastructure and perpetuate mass poverty, which means their attempt to resolve things like energy conflict actually retrenches the structures of global inequality that cause them to begin with. The framework to make counter-interpretive debate is a game of completely competing political imaginaries. That means we get to contest both the plan and its ideological commitments. They say it doesn't shape they say it doesn't shape subjectivity. This is false. Genlink, Louisville, prove balance shape subjectivity in the margins. Second is to make the foundation for teaching us political engagement by forcing us to question substance. We spend too much time here at the expense of other things. They don't have a reverse causal argument to make and undo those influence from the outside. They also have a cross-sex double bind that kind of answers this argument. The group their offense. One is reciprocal recording lines for the avatar in their core thesis. The alternative would be worse. They would always lose. They can sever F fairness use a novel because new art school resources. Second is they filter debate through an 8-second statement, and their model includes process counterpoints and picks which link to all of their offense. The Isaac card. You should prefer a question what kinds of scholarship we can produce. Their model of clash in a vacuum doesn't produce more knowledge. It rather refines text starting axiomatic assumptions. More processing power can't make them less racist, only more efficient at racism, which turns clash because it makes us fantastically efficient war criminals anticipating structural violence in their politics rather than dwelling with a deliberate sense of truth. It proves that our counterinterpretation is far better. We should switch ideologies, not sides. This implicates the alt because it means we get to if they're right, then we get consequences. Then we get to fiat the mechanism of the alternative because it's about reciprocal desirability, not feasibility. The waste recycling argument, it says that we need policy steps. It also says, quote, proposed technology. None of this technology is being implemented in the status quo. It means that it still triggers the Africa scenario. This turns the Membe frames uniqueness question. New trajectory of unequal exchange will play out in Africa. The last frontier of capitalism, massive resources and current investment in Africa prove, but specifically it's a place for two things. One is mineral extraction. 90% of chromium and platinum group, 40% of gold. Renewables require these in the status quo. Group this from 2021 and shows wind and solar cells rely on mineral extraction. Chinese imperial exploits thus overlap with the U.S. Its desire for constant expansion of its profitable industry leads it to Africa. This is Raimondi. China and the U.S. have clear intent to fight over the market. Given its importance to industrial societies, China always already has a head start in its economic control of parts of Africa, which means that the U.S. can only take an escalatory position. Second is sustainable biotopes. Sustainable development goals are not just about the technology that the YAF develops. They are also about clearing massive amounts of biospace for carbon capture and tree replanting. Elements of climate control and regulation that Western nations want to test. Africa is both a place to test technologies for development and implementation and a place to actually implement them. Membe says that Africa is central to global environmental crisis and carbon storage potential is immense. The desire to exploit its renewable energies overlaps. If that is true, that the U.S. and China both commit sustainability development goals, then it will create cooperation, but will create conflict over who can best control the sustainable future. This causes conflict over Africa, accelerates to extinction. The testing stuff independently turns the Africa, creates tech dumps like Agbogbwashi in Ghana, which is the most toxic place on Earth. Failed sustainable tech comes to actually produce, to actually pollute and destroy African communities and landscapes, which accelerates ecological crisis and is a form of unequal exchange that demonstrates that our thesis is true, which means it frames your vision of the way U.S. and China interact. Any problem you have with our evidence is supplemented by stronger internal links and an overall thesis that explains industrial societies and their desire for war. U.S.-China war is a result of cross-investment between U.S. and Chinese corporations, which showed by Croker and Robinson. Imperial powers create direct tension that leads to existential crisis and nuclear war. These powers are irrational imperialists. Any defense that doesn't assume these warrants from our theory should be crossed off your flow. The Membe shift inevitable argument. No, our argument is about SDDs licensing this kind of mining. They have no defense as to how their recycled technologies get implemented in time to prevent this scenario. The sustainable REMs argument. Countries that follow SDGs don't use sustainable tech REMs. We are outcarding them on this question. All of the 1 and C evidence on this, which I will extend later. They say they influence water management. This card is an Africa link to the app. 2AC HUS says, quote, IRWM framework has been implemented to address a range of water problems in sub-Saharan Africa. Flood protection, pollution management proves that their kind of cooperative framework actually results in interventions in Africa. The the SDG brings people together card. It has no China war and it's extremely techno-futurist. We just strike it off your flow. Second is the card says China and the US employed different strategies that basically says that we send them studies and recommendations and they fucking ghosted us. Extend the Croker card. They have misinterpreted China's intent for sustainability. This is actually part of an imperial technological war between the US and China. RF is way better on this cooperation between two imperial powers and a system of unequal exchange is impossible because they're premised on infinite expansion. The status quo Huawei serves as the biggest modern technological scapegoat for American ideological dissent with China. This is where the direction of strategic moves has gone, and it's about the question of who will code the digital future. This is a new frontier of speculative capitalism. We are winning a uniqueness question that is with the eclipse of American tech by 5G. The U.S. is in a uniquely paranoid and insecure position, which means techno races inevitably escalate to full-scale war. Turns the app with a plan actually does begin developing U.S. sustainability tech and industry China is involved in, which doesn't promote cooperation, but technological races and escalations with China. This occurs because of the Silicon Valley techno-futurist ideology, which permeates all of their sustainability evidence, which means that you should not evaluate it. 1AC Sa, who also turns the app, means you vote negative presumption. It at best proves that all the app does is replicate Chinese imperialist discourse on energy securitization. All of their energy independence have Kiev used the same rhetoric that this card criticizes. So as they lead to over-securitizing policies, scenario 2 is literally about stressing the importance of water because of Chinese economic developments and brands. Is a terrible card for them. At best, renewable energy independence becomes more a move to export violence on places like Taiwan. Is either a weapon used to force assimilation or next dumping ground for renewable waste. Is backlash for Chinese nationalism. It's 20 Sahu 22. The most critical area of this securitized 2007 energy policy mentioned recent official discourse policy for securitization in China development is the only for survival of China's rapidly evolving national security discourse that climate has security implementation for military militarizes China's hydropower policy, particularly in the context of Sino-Indian confrontation over water issues, stretches securitization victory in all respects and realize the Chinese dream. Okay, I read the wrong highlighting. I don't care about the card anymore. Okay. The Copeland evidence from 1999, it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply either, but the brand evidence that they read is actually horrible. It doesn't conclude in any of the statements that they make about cooperation. Simply makes an argument about the U.S. Leaving a gap in Taiwan, which doesn't do anything. The renewable stuff, they say SDGs for cooperation, so it's not distinct from fossil fuels, that they require sources from the global south. This form of extraction is unequally distributed. One is repression. Imperial capitalist powers must enforce unequal exchange in order to acquire raw materials for profit. It causes militarized counterinsurgency and war in nations like Africa and South America, which are source of these renewables, which is our Africa scenario. Second is the dream of oncoming renewables emboldens the hydrocarbon industry to justify increased status quo emissions because they defer crisis to be dealt with by fancy of technological perfection. Those industries pour money into carbon capture and bioenergy to defer dealing with the consequence of sustainability. That'll be in the 1 R. Third is the mineral mining stuff, which is already done, but this evidence is also making arguments about the mineral mining. Membe specifics them are speculating in Africa, which means continued mining both causes war in Africa, but also causes China to scale up its own domestic mining, which destroys their water management by causing pollution, which turns the energy conflict stuff. Their own example of Russia and China and the US prove our thesis of imperialism. They don't even solve because their whole scene cards about conflict in Ukraine, which is one, non-unique in now, and two, that'll reads the app solves imperialism outweighs or controlling a thesis as to why war happens, a process of acquisition of assets, economic collapse, or perceived dwindling source of profits, cause imperial militarism in global south and competition among imperial members. The last card is the OECD card. It's about the possibility. It's not specific or prescriptive. The permutation links are just proves functional trade-off. Second is they're incompatible with the alt. They rely on suppressing communities, US and China, necessary for its execution. That's Dwyer. And 21, Biden pledge wind, solar, carbon capture, green technology, rare earth minerals, neodymium, pit mining, which disrupts ecosystem, releasing contaminants, threaten air and groundwater quality. Co-hosts another primary extraction from DCR, where children are young to 5 years old to work in mines. Several whole companies appear to be moral compromisers. Supply chains linked to forced labor, Uyghur Muslims, Xinjiang, China, forced labor, toxic waste, polluted groundwater suppression. Local communities are hallmarks. Yeah, just ignore the like highlighting of their Sahu card. I already explained what the card says, so I accidentally read their highlighting, so it doesn't matter. I should have probably put like we read green, but I didn't.
All right. Are you good?
Yeah.
Cool. Framework. What do we have to win to get the way the AF?
What do you mean?
Like, under what threshold do we get to weigh the like impacts of the AF? Do we get to under your interpretation or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So it's purely a question. Okay, then I want to ask.
Wait. No, but framework is an important part of the debate. I wouldn't ignore it so quickly. Framework is a question of whether or not we get to of how we get to fiat the alternative. Like our argument is that framework should be reciprocal about desirability, not feasibility, which is why I asked you that question in cross-ex of the 1AC about if the question of the AF is about should we do the AF, it should not be a question of like feasibility, which means things like, like you don't get to fiat like movements or anything like that.
Your interpretation is that you just get to reciprocally ask if like some sort of thing would be desirable.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can fiat like every country in the world acting in unison as long as it's begging the question of if it's desirable. Okay,
our argument is we fiat external actors of movements. We're not saying countries immediately
Okay,
change,
wait,
but rather, wait. But rather, those movements are able to, we are defending, like you can do offense on whether or not those movements will succeed, but we get to fiat those movements happen as a result of the epistemology of the alternative. So it's not like everybody immediately does degrowth, but rather it's a question of like, should we do this specific process to lead to a goal? That's what the
if it's cool, I want to ask, fiating external actors in movements, is that fiating people within every country? Is it specific people in some countries?
It's fiating like specific kind of like so our argument is about the distinction between the global south and the global north. So the alternative would apply to things like agents repressed by the global north get to be fiated to like revolt, right?
Okay,
So,
so
the evidence we just read, the evidence we just read is like
if you don't mind, can I ask, does that mean you fiat specifically agents in the global south who are being repressed by the global north?
No, it's our argument is about agents repressed by the global north. For example, people like Uyghurs in Xinjiang, right? They count as people who are able to be granted like revolutionary agency by the alternative, right? So like we think we get to fiat.
So the alternative has to win. The alternative has to win that Uyghurs, even with revolutionary agency, are able to
the AF
beat
has
the
to win.
CCP
Wait. So this logic applies to the AF in the same way. It's like your argument is that like in an age of political polarization, you fiat the not only like lack of the like not I forget the like
these
term
do
for
not
it,
feel
but like
like
it doesn't get
reciprocal
overturned. It stays in Congress. It gets passed by Congress, even though Congress was passed.
Okay,
is like
if it's
distracted
cool,
by
I have
Russia.
one more question.
But
Really
the AF
important.
is equally as fantastic.
Mbembe
It's just like the
evidence-
norm we're used to in debate.
Okay. Ignoring that, Mbembe evidence, we would invade Africa to create land for like carbon capture. Why do we go to Africa? Why not just take like empty land in the US?
Because
like,
Mbembe is talking about Africa specifically being desirable for these things and being demarcated by the global north as desirable for those things. It's like we're outcarding you on specificity.
Well, actually, take like 1 second to prep. Starting now.
Great.
Hold on, Drew. Nutri's taking prep.
Okay, we used 23 seconds. We had 8:01. That is that 7:38? I think that is.
Yeah, it's 7:38.
Cool.
My bad, I had my volume down. All right. I sent cards, and the order is I'm starting on the 2AC Bailey evidence. So like I'm going to do the 2AC sustainability stuff and move down the order they did it, and then the alternative. Is everyone good? All right, perfect.
Wait, I think Brennan needs 1 second.
Yeah, sorry, I need to get the card.
We're gonna take 1 second to prep. $20 seconds. I don't know how much we have. Does anyone know? 8 something, 8:58. Got it.
Yep. All right. The order's still the same. Brendan, are you good now? Okay.
The Bailey card first is just another link. It's only evidence about absolute decoupling occurring is strictly limited to the U.S. with just an answer offshoring. Second is extent Helen limit any sports planetary boundary accumulation can't be infinite. Dwindling resource produce conflicts. We use 1.5 planets now. The Earth, global North lives as if there were 5 people inhabited in 2005. The population continues to rise by another 50% by 2025. If everyone continues to consume the way they want it to, it guarantees extinction before innovation can help be exposed disease under global change makes the global south susceptible to disease outbreaks like malaria and cholera as a result of infrastructure inadequacy, exploitation of southern water, the wall, as well as evidence. Even if it delays it, doesn't stop the inevitable due for climate discard. Doesn't assume how capitalism actually actively contributes to our inability to solve which are offense, because we can agree we can maybe solve climate, but only with the alternative. The India and China outweigh stuff. The alt will solve that. The brand's evidence turn the US-led imperialist bloc lashes out. That's lost in 18 imperialist wars are part of global class struggle. From Kyle's point of view, wars and investment NATO's made very aggressive expanding Yugoslav conflict, first Gulf War and terror invasion Afghanistan, Iraq, NATO also defeating Libya, and Syria wars, whether against secure substance government, social movements, imperialist rivals, or inevitable consequences, imperialist vote of production. The US is on decline, tries to compensate for its loss of economic dominance with military powers that launch nuclear strike against it with the NATO to spill war and needs to change. Protect Howell's brands, Johnson 19 Halberds, senior fellow of the Center for Spending and Boundary Assessment Organization, have contributed to efforts. Jet recognized national steel shipping company and Cycle Hunting Bills, Jeopardy, Maritime Self Defense, Lockheed Martin, Grumman, Rather and Companies, Equal Holdings, Boeing, Boeing, brands, senior fellow organization, and funded almost entirely by those with clearances, and the company's $700 billion bill defense budget brand is pushing for. We learned to defend out and experts funded by the tobacco industry or climate change funded by the big oil. Mark the card of big oil. The GLD evidence first, nothing about the evidence solves the forced labor that goes in development, the extraction of those resources. Second, it doesn't solve the physical panels and wind turbine blades that get recycled into landfills and communities that are less developed. Even if they solve the extraction process, they don't solve the also aftermath. That's why evidence. The problem with this Morse evidence they keep referencing, even if it's right, it's written in 2017, it does assume the new conditions outlined by the Croco evidence in 2021. They say no exportation. To say it's only domestic production ignores the way they use capitalism intertwined with the global south, which is proof that our link in order to sustain development domestic technologies. The thesis of unequal exchange is that U.S. dependent on labor exports from abroad to maintain low level of price levels for consumers. Drop down to 2AC swan evidence under the Helen language answers. We solve innovation better Smith and 20 advances, 20 frontiers, and risky advances may not be performing commercially visible. Result takes decades. Leading regions of technology source lies within a competition long-term production or database for research continued by the government like biology, GPS, projects created to provide research, provide proof of concept, greater enormous advantages. Apple's product corporate key innovation, develop public research, innovation, fuel, technical change, people, figuring knowledge, collect innovation can be unlimited free, good rather than scarce commodities, open source, address air capital with next firms, extended over property, more workers sign away property, IPS, hyper investment by recent costs of engaging production, diverting funds to legal costs for redeemable, make invention, articles of future capital should be done away with advanced productivity, result and reduce reduce work. Part of the card reduce work. The last card, the last card. SDGs don't work. That's Fletcher Remlin 17. Decoupling may constitute central fantasy. Object that dispels the infeasibility. Decoupling central fantasy, giving force to capital, giving force to capitalist economy. Staying with the parent to boundaries possible. Now, decoupling innovation, deal level plus your economies away from producers. Itself, decoupling the concept remains vacuous. This offset by shifting material environment to developing countries. Different products, gains research periodically lead to greater resource use and relikely political and central politics. Regard this as too restricted. Demilitarization strategy. The Industrial Revolution failed to neutralize overall growth of because cycles possible. Each cycle of matters lost create value the entry law, even as business renewable energy given for magic complex materials and non-material activities, material concepts to create the economy will always demand growing energy input over production costs must rise to make markets no longer function until would replace current sectors like leading sectors grounded in fossil fuels. Demilitarization is dependent on cheap labor. The alternative is a decolonial movement towards eco that follows the demanding emanating from the global south for post-growth policy making like the People's Agreement Code Tramba that are backed by hundreds of movements around the war. Realign ourselves with liberatory mobilizations like the Zapatistas that position themselves in resistance to colonial, anti-black, and anti-indigenous character growth struggles that are interconnecting and feed off each other. The alternative stitches together transnational social movements capable of holding resource imperialism as a central object attack. We must produce a convergent strategy. Northern economy needs southern ones, and decolonial habits by limiting those colonial forms of accumulation and equality. This solves the African winter capacity to shape global economics, and we can create ego socialism that's much more effective than stopping conflict between pro actors because we have one thesis to how those conflicts originate in 4 states, which is the whole twin. We do have an actor, which are all the movements specified in context and above in the text and and we have a text as per the Hickel evidence. They get to be all members of Congress through the when everyone is focused on Russia. They get advantages premise on international cooperation should be reciprocal. They say they all is not is imaginary field. It's uniquely capitalist thinking. It says socialism works in theory, but not in practice. Just to create passive actors. It's more predictable. Grade 18 policy applies to the leaker that gets feels whatever else. There's a little mental trick. We say, what are we going to do about X factor? Having part of that 3% do actually affect policymakers. All make believe we are identifying rules and we're the ones being what I fund such games pen niches that for not to be policy. Policy leads around all prefer solutions to be media policies that do not give more power to governments cooperation, but like the people means to manage general affairs and face the social problem. I post not to match myself in charge and part of what solutions I would impose to look for move already out there, already trying to address the solution, create its own solutions. What local initiatives might such a movement propose? People would joke the alternative. The current campus mindset creates a docile subject that cements passivity, but an attitude of political growth can be effective in shifting away from this. Also, all the examples and empirics given in this speech disprove this thesis.
Okay, we had 7:38. Start that now. Okay, I ended prop 342. I will send out cards. Um, The order is going to be case K. Okay, is everyone good? Cool. The app solves water management, which is the only thing inhibiting cooperation over SDGs that is key to energy security and CCP economic stability. Those both go nuclear and cause extinction if we don't preserve them. That's the Holstein and Carpenter evidence. They've conceded both the impacts, which are DAs to the all, because the lack of energy security that means that the U.S. lashes out and we lose alliance commitments, which cause nuclear war. That's the Lattice law evidence and the Holstein evidence. That other impact is the CCP economic collapse. If the all causes that, then they cause extinction, which the Carpenter evidence, which says it would cause war over Taiwan, which Tolman evidence says it causes extinction. They have conceded that extinction outweighs, which is the Burke evidence, which says that is a prior question because it forms all forms of being, which means that it's triad IF on the K framework. Use consequences in the way the Affirmative versus competitive opportunity cost alternative preferred. It's key to fairness. Fairness. Their interpreters advise the race in the margins for teams to imagine a way broad structures instead of engaging the one AC. It makes being F impossible in text fairness, which is both an impact failure and an intrinsic good. In the context of capitalism, the best literature on either side is about the process of meeting strategies. Their model ruins political organizing. Since whether the F solves shapes what the alt solves shapes whether we should invest energy into it. They don't have a definition of what an ideological commitment is, which means that you presume that they don't have a link because of the fairness and all stuff. That's not true. Not true. Plan space is a key to create predictability so that we can access that. The theory beats process counterparts and picks, but I'm not sure why those make fairness and all those seem fine to me. The politics bad. That's obviously not true because obviously justifications are still determined whether you win, but it should be under analysis of links to the plan, which is the Isaac evidence that they consider, which has consequences frame ethicality. There's no link to the more efficient races racist people, obviously, because it begs the question of whether capitalism is good in the first place. All fails. Time skills means an entire die. That's true at all. 20. Decode the purchase unworkable. Don't think specific political projects is helpful. Crucial and have to be addressed now. Fundamental problems at time skills and just manually craft is an impossible time that we have, which requires international mobilization that all overthrow all private ownership to people seriously think that this could happen in time to stabilize the climate. No buying. That's Smith evidence. All requires the entire world to collectively agree to massively increase poverty, that give up healthcare and housing, etc., and participate in global revolutionary wars and militaries will crack down. Framing issue. This isn't one revolution, but hundreds that all need to succeed. They need to overthrow global capitalism in order to solve their links and sustainability arguments. All they said in response to India and China emissions outweigh is that the alt solves them, but they obviously don't solve them because they would need to overthrow India and China. All they fiat is movements that are repressed won't be repressed momentarily, but those movements fail because of governments. Will concede on all theory that they set in the scope of the alt is just the movements that they fiat, which they can't means that they can't fiat like things like CCP or U.S. government restraint, which means that the alt inevitably fails. So you don't give them the new hedge bad card. You can't set back the new impact turn to the one R. There's no offshoring or renewables link. First, definitely the alt doesn't solve other countries. Second, perm obviously solves this. If the alt has no reason water management defines secret solvency. Third, we're nearshoring renewables. That's a Fortuna evidence, which goes conceded. We're creating wind, solar, hydro, and nuclear power in the U.S., not relying on abroad. But if we're not, the app solves the link to domestic water mismanagement. It's the only reason domestic renewables fail. DPA authorization solves minerals. It's MDC 44. Adjusted and authorized DPA to increase the metal production, reduce reliance on friction. Patents act to make clear. Battery supply chain recycling is national priority. Critical minerals need for energy transition directive authorized minerals for batteries such as lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, and manganese. They can see the the evidence I just read says that we will recycle, which means that we solve that. The DPA proves that the evidence that proves their theory wrong, because instead of escalating extraction in Africa, the U.S. turned inwards, disproves the whole theory because the environmental offloading stuff, there's no impact to it. That if we win, that we solve try to better the conflict over Africa is wrong. There's no escalation. Ukraine proves the war. U.S. won't go to war over strategic positions, but rather over treating allied commitments, which is true for places like Taiwan, but not Africa, which is a carpenter evidence. Sustainability stuff. Growth is sustainable as the economy grows and affects an increase in material consumption, decrease in price, maximum allocate resources to the best, most efficient use, newest data and trends, prove decoupling is possible. That's debately evidence that climate change will be averted. The coal, ninefold increase in lithium battery and renewable prices, the decrease in the prices that already peaked oil demand and emissions rates, and aggressive global climate change means keeping below 2 degrees warming is a walk in the park. We have until 2080 to reach net zero with negative emissions. That's the Wallace evidence, which means it's not just a delay. The materials we've already decoupled them for 53 materials, recycling, 3D printing, solve the other things. That's the Bailey evidence. The stuff about them solving innovation better. There's no impact to it as long as we solve it. The Fletcher evidence, Javance is wrong, which Cole disproves. The politically unpopular is the other one, which our evidence disproves. We won't invade article Africa. I did that. The yes cooperation key. That's the Morse evidence frame this turn to the fact that they don't have uniqueness for it. China wants to work with the U.S. now, and the steps to the quad model where we give China money, which the MBB the evidence it says that it spills over to other areas because we have similar systems.
Um, 858.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. Got a pretty long ass overview, and then I'll jump into the 1IR. All right. I see Jake laughing. I told you it's the least techie captivate. All right. Is anyone not good? Cool. They have lost this debate to a more specific impact scenario covered with an explanatory thesis or understanding imperialism. It outweighs your controlling a thesis to why more happens in the process of the acquisition of assets. Our argument is U.S.-Chinese cooperation is simply not possible to the extent that they articulated. The only cooperation that exists is peripheral and not in industries that have overlapping competition in. The idea that U.S. and China would collaborate on the management of this technology is laughable. Imperial powers must pursue constant growth. Examples like Russia's imperial war on Ukraine for its resources and land, which are in their plus the entire history of colonial capitalism, means you are very skeptical of the idea that power collaboration could lead to anything but future conflict. Competition. War is a process of acquiring assets perceived by one power that the other is stealing source of tangible profit, lead to inevitable escalation. This is what the AF does. Croker should also frame your concept of China and the U.S. The way capitalism intersects with technologies is jostling over who will determine the technological future. Croker explicitly connects it to techno-futurism, which is exactly what sustainable development goals are. The idea of outlining how society organizes technologies, this possibility of controlling the direction of that trajectory is extremely appealing and profitable, demonstrated by Croker's Huawei example. This means the AF situates itself in a broader ideological struggle over the future capitalist technology that plays out in Africa. Every card in this debate points towards the Africa scenario that independently turns the AF-led is one and renewables. Like unequal exchanges enforced along ecological lines placed in agriculture, like agriculture in Ghana, are rated by an offshoring ecological responsibility onto the other while simultaneously extracting from them. Our evidence is too good on this question. The 2 hours too late. This means you control an explanation of how sustainable development goals are actually achieved since their cards are warrantless. Second is Membe. It's specific to how Africa is speculated it's the place by the global north to develop new carbon sequestration because of its massive project. This is an internal link that they have no card to answer to. Aligning with SDGs causes exhalation of the biotope of Africa. Controlling it is key to winning the sustainability war. B is mineral mining. We are outcarding the other problem with every single AF card. It's purely speculative. It says we should or could do things, but never say we will do them. And certainty doesn't say that they will happen as a result of the plan. This means our defensive argument about recycling is hypothetical tech that hasn't been implemented yet. And it causes places like Agua to pop up all over the world, which means it causes more Chinese water restriction because it pollutes Chinese waters and turns the AF scenario, which means that unrecyclable tech actually turns their own AF offense. The 2AC read a card that articulates how this takeover of Africa happens. The 2AC Hull card says, quote, if IRWM framework has been implemented to address a range of water problems across the world, for example, public health problems in sub-Saharan Africa, they pose themselves benevolent, sustainable actors in Africa, and then they start extracting. This leads to escalation, mineral mining in highly competitive industry for U.S. and China. Their ebb is in the context of water policy. It does assume influence over mine and mineral mining and how competitive it is. This means no cooperation, but also escalation. 1AR got to cooperation with 30 seconds left, with less than 30 seconds left. Declaring commitment to sustainability goals actually caused the U.S. to ramp up its location of REM, which it and China have already entered the early stage of doing in Africa. This is an independent dissent, turns the scenarios conflict with China makes their last scenario impossible, and it happens before all the others. In order to commit to SDGs and begin working towards them, we have to engage in Africa, which means our impact comes first. Literally, they don't get the whole scene advantage. It's about security, energy security in Eastern Europe. The first advantage is terrible, and the second advantage has already been impact turn because we don't cooperate with China, which means you can vote negative on presumption. The framework debates are irrelevant. Our links are to the plan. It says that the U.S. retrenching into SDGs inaugurates the worst stage of unequal exchange capitalism in Africa, which proves that there's no reason for them to go for any of this framework argument. The card that they read about the alternative, I'll do it first. We get reciprocal fiat. The debate is a question of desirability, not feasibility. Every time they try to characterize our all just fantastic imagination, you should feel through 2 frames. One is it's a uniquely capitalist frame that assumes the impossibility of communism. It's the same narrative as socialism works in theory but not practice. Should be rejected. It's a part of a Prelude position of us in the global north in order to deny culpability and structures of oppression by saying it can't happen. Second is throw out debate bias and the activity where use of plans that think it's fine to fiat, but they're really fiating attitudinal durable policy narrow of massive polarization. They think a totally distracted government by Russia, a polarized government, a government being criticized for valuing the climate over things like gas prices can be fiated to do the AF. Also, tons of individual actors of Congress means you view the all fiat as reciprocal. International movements already exist like Chile and Zapatistas and weaker forms of resistance, but we think the debate should be a question of what would happen if those are already feasible movements gained in intensity to overthrow capitalism. The alt orients our practice towards degrowth mindset that hopes to eliminate colonial force accumulation that threaten the global south. We can fiat the movements those subjugated by the no global north towards more sustainable methods of living. They said we get movement fiat, but did not address the intensity portion of the debate, which means you should presume the movements can generate enough momentum to overthrow capitalist hierarchies, extend Graber movement fiat is most predictable because invaders have more direct influence on O-grain movements rather than the 3% who do actually do still. It's also awesome to talk about what massive systems far beyond your control do. It's also a control link that makes you empathize with those that you want to keep far from levels of control. It's a drop card. It means you view the all fiat as reciprocal. That's the stuff that I did about, they say, time scale. One, extend fletcher, try to have a new mode of economic organizing in order to actually meet SDGs because decoupling not physically possible. Do law of entry. Jevons paradox says one and why this says recycling becomes offshore. They drop the recycling argument. Second, it said loss and warfare is inevitable consequence of imperialism. Sustained production. It doesn't matter that it's new because it's a consequence of the imperialism thesis in the one and C. It means the resource distribution becomes more unequal in NATO, and the West will only grow more aggressive, create inevitable transition war, which happens before their offense. Also, sustainability. Smith says socialism first more advances through government funding and public research. They send IPRs rather than dismissing that prevent the rise of production. The minerals that they read in the 1AR flows neg. It just says that mining is a priority and that we don't want to rely on China. Then they'll rely on Africa instead of China, compete with China, which means that's a link card to the dissad that the AFA lies with this kind of goal. They say they're creating power in the US. That still relies on mining, which just doesn't matter. The no escalation argument doesn't matter because the imperial thesis turns this. The only reason alliances exist is for the extraction of profit, which means we go to war in Africa.
Cool. I think we have 342. Taking that now. Okay. Case K. Is anyone not ready? Cap K debates can be messy, but there are two things to hang your hat on. The first is the whole scene evidence. Energy wars that impact is an independent impact. You can hang your hat on U.S. commitments to sustainable development goals, increases investments for renewables. That's the Smith and half. These evidence because it lends coherence to the current slew of environmental policy Biden is doing, which then increases the being put into renewables. That solves energy, or that solves for energy independence. McGill evidence, specifically in the 1AC, says that Ukraine provides a break because we can no longer rely on oil from Russia, which means that we have to scale up renewables in order to solve that. The whole scene evidence is not found by Ukraine. It cites NATO as an example, but the bottom part of the card says that independently having energy independence is key to both making sure our military is able to remain independent and making sure that we don't aren't forced to go to war over oils, which turns their Africa impact because we would have to invade African countries for oil, but it also solves the impact of that because we'd be able to process our own renewables, so we wouldn't have to invade them. That is an external impact that is not implicated by any of the REM availability stuff, because which I'm going to do in the K-flow proper, but the other impact here is the Carpenter evidence. I'm going to articulate it more on the K, or more into the K, which you should go to now because it's D2, the alternative stuff I'm doing at the top because it's a prior question to the impacts of the K, because if we win, the alt causes massive amounts of war, then they're not able to solve any of their impacts. 3 reasons the alt triggers war. 1, they don't solve, but the 1 conceded that they can fiat move in action, not the US or CCP restraint, which is reciprocal and meets their interpretation. It means movements will inevitably go right back to being. So 2NC Crosstek's example here is damning because it was the Uyghurs. Obviously, they can fiat that the Uyghurs try harder, but it's not going to matter because they will be crushed by the power of the CCP. It's simply not a reciprocal amount of power, even if there is more emphasis being put into them. The CCP has the ability to destroy them. Second is even if they win, they solve the impact. We've impacted alt solvency. When I see Carpenter says the CCP's stability is held up by an implicit bargain about economics and nationalism, but the CCP is no longer able to provide economic stability to their people, which may be caused by a shift to Uyghur. They increase nationalism, which then incentivizes war over the Taiwan Strait. They conceded the 2AC Barrett evidence that extinction outweighs because biological life is a prerequisite to any of their impacts, which means that transition wars should be at the top of your ballot. The rest of the K debate proper, I don't have to do a ton of work because even if we lose the sustainability debate or some of the inroads to their impacts, if their alternative causes war, it is try or die. The stuff about how they have more specific internal links, it is untrue. Our internal links, their internal link escalation was vague, whereas ours was dropped, which means you should give it more weight. The stuff about U.S.-China cooperation fails. The sustainability debate solves that. That's a Bailey evidence. Resource recycling and dematerialization mean that we're able to replace our own resources, so we would not have to invade Africa for those resources. It's specific to REMs. The Kyoto evidence substantiates that because it's not specifically in the realm of REs. We're able to recycle them, which inevitably becomes more profitable. So we're more profitable. So companies are incentivized to do it. The it though, because the Morris evidence says that we would use international financing institutions to put money into those institutions, but they don't have uniqueness for this turn. The Morris evidence says that China wants to cooperate with the U.S. The only question is whether the U.S. is willing to cooperate with them. But even then, the Wallace evidence solves any external impact about the environment because it says that we've decreased emissions sufficiently that we don't need to invest in carbon capture because we've simply reduced emissions enough, which answers any of the reciprocal stuff. The other stuff on the China links, it's game over when they concede there's no impact to them. 1, the excess waste link, no reason dumping in Africa causes extinction. Extinction outweighs because they've not read an external impact to it. Second, the pollution link. We said that the U.S. won't mine in Africa since 1 of our MDC evidence says we're building our domestic REM supply by mining, production, recycling here in the U.S. We never said that China wouldn't, but since we're winning, the U.S. won't go to war in Africa. There's no impact to China doing it since they won't cause conflict with the U.S. The REM mining link, recycling obviously solved. That's the Bailey and Kyoto extensions I did above. The only answer to this was it's hypothetical, but Bailey says 3D printing and recycling have already decoupled 53 materials. And the 1AR MDC evidence says that Biden just funded REM recycling meeting that's coming up now. It is about national domestic supply chains, not international supply chains. They also concede the impact defense to all their links. The only impact is conflict between the U.S. and China, but they concede the 1AR analysis of how the U.S. will not go to war over Africa. Ukraine obviously proves that the U.S. won't go to war with anyone unless we have treaty commitments, but that's not true for Africa, but it is true for Taiwan. That's the 1AC Carpenter evidence, which they implicitly agree that China war impact is one of the most important impacts because that was literally the only impact as of the 1NC. The biospace Africa stuff I expounded above how we don't need the space for carbon capture because Wallace says we sufficiently decrease emissions. So stuff about how there's no certification no certainty they will adapt the tech. I did the stuff about how they don't have uniqueness for that, but the Morris evidence says that China wants the U.S. to cooperate with them. The He evidence from the 2AC says the AF is key to more collaboration because the U.S. and China China have similar mechanisms to prevent pollution. So once they would start cooperating over that, they would have incentives to cooperate more. The China pollution impact, it doesn't turn it one, because if we win that we're able to scale up our REMs, we would just give those realms to China because they would now be a partner under the Sustainable Development Goals cooperation. Second, it does not access second, it is turned by the Carpenter stuff, because the actual transition to degrowth obviously occurs on a faster time frame. That
even if they win no cooperation, we still access them.
even if they win no cooperation, we still access Holstein because that's not based on cooperation.
Good debate.
Good debate.
Great debate, y'all.
Y'all want a card doc?
Yeah.
F card not consent. My bad. I forgot Barrett from the 2AC. That was the util card. I'll resend it with that in it. My bad. It was Burke. My bad. They have very, very similar names. Okay, sorry. I said the one with Burke. That's my bad.
Okay, I think we're all in, but I have no idea where Cairn is. Oh. Oh, there's Kevin. Okay.
Okay. Is everybody here?
Drew, is Zach there? Okay.
Congrats to both teams on making it to Monday the TOC. The decision was a 3-0 for the negative from Berkeley. I thought this was a really fun debate to sift through, which is why I kind of took a while doing it, and I thought it was pretty close. Ultimately, I thought the alternative was a more desirable strategy, generally because US-China cooperation was fated to fail, and because the broader alliance system that the US supports is irreconcilable with Chinese desires, and this kind of just makes offense try or die for the relatively unclear trajectory of the alternative to create a new world order that doesn't make like extinction from hegemonic transition wars a guarantee. Okay, so kind of start with the co-op fail stuff. I didn't really think the ever argumentation was phenomenal on like why China wants to cooperate with the US on sustainable development, why they trust the US. It, like Croker like basically makes the hardline, like right wing or revisionist argument, says, quote, Pearl River ideology runs parallel to the global ambitions of the Chinese state to demand respect for China. And basically says that like China doesn't want to work with the US for the same reason the US doesn't want to work with China. They don't trust each other. They're both in a mindset that there's a zero-sum competition for being the unipole. And as a result, they see everything the other does as tinted with danger. And I kind of agree with the neg characterization of your, one AC card and two AC cards, which are all kind of short, kind of similar, that they're all just like US China ideally would have all these mutual interests, but not that really will cooperate. And that obviously takes out the top level impact that you're orienting the debate around. If it's true that, the US isn't going to be able to assist them or to mutually develop effective water management systems with them, even if they win even if you win the dematerialization stuff and the sustainability stuff. But there are two like other sources of basically internal link turns here. Number one is just out of all the neg stuff in the debate, and I am sympathetic because there's like a billion of them and they're all extended pretty quickly. The one that just seemed like really dangerous was the Lawson card, and like the US-led imperial bloc is oriented against both Russia and China. And then the Robinson card impacting that stuff. It just kind of seems like we're in a Thucydides trap where in the current global economic paradigm, US-China war is totally inevitable because of the incentive structure we have, which is why you kind of need like a domestic political transition if you're going to avoid that prioritizes something besides growth, status, etc. And then the other is like sustainability is like kind of close. I mean, I do think the neg definitely like loses most of the stuff about Africa just based off of the 1AR dematerialization or not recycling now stuff. But it doesn't matter all that much in terms of the China hegemonic transition stuff that I was discussing. I mean, the other advantage also kind of is taken out by this. Obviously, it's like almost a direct impact turn. And so now determining how the alt works is difficult. I think I give a little bit of leeway to the neg just because I think they're really controlling the theory debating here in terms of like, they have an argument that it's more predictable than just government fiat in general because we can control it and like movements exist and stuff like that. And so they just get to like make them both bigger and do more, but it's not clear by how much exactly. And it's not clear what linking up actually does, because they don't really have a card on that or explain it super well. Although it is maybe feasible that if you imagine literally all of the movements that are anti-capitalist and all of the countries in the world get together and like actually kind of have a united front to pressure the US, China, and every other major world power to change the way they're operating, maybe there could be some domestic transition that would then lead to an alternative world. Probably low risk, but it seems like the only clear way to avoid otherwise inevitable hegemonic transition wars. But it was kind of weird because I thought like neither side actually had a being like, oh yeah, movements cause transition wars, or movements work and put pressure to cause a new world. Obviously, if they do that, then they solve like the whole case better and stuff. You know, I don't think it's high risk. That was how I saw it. But I really enjoyed the debate, and you know, really enjoyed getting to judge you over the course of this year. I'm not sure what your college plans are. If you are debating in college, I'd love to see you there in the future. And if not, congrats on a fantastic career.
I can go next. So I just want to follow up with Kevin's sentiment. Like, it was a pleasure judging you two Nutriers. Like, really it's awesome to see you two grow, especially like knowing little War Shower because of his brother for like a while. And like, if this is the end of like both your debate careers, like you all were like fantastic, phenomenal, like Nutrier debaters for sure. So like making sure like that North Shore decided debate is always like very competitive and whatnot. But in the end, I voted negative. I think that the neg wins that conflict is just inevitable in the status quo, regardless like how the thing is, regardless whether or not voting F is like good or not. I don't think the F solves anything, given that like I agree with Kevin to like the neg is controlling the theory of power, that like imperialism is the mindset like goes in regardless, and think that's a conceded like uniqueness issue, which should be like framed at the top of like the 2NR to really be like concession for a uniqueness issue means it's like game over, like all the representation arguments like clearly go away. So, and I just think like there's a risk of the alternative solvency. Like the most part where I had like conflicting, I thought it was close to voting F was like the transition war stuff and whether or not that did outweigh like the impacts at the end of the day. The two things that made me not vote neg was one, I think like the way that the alt is characterized is just movements just coexist and like they just do. And I don't have a link as to like why those cause a transition war. They're just like these movements just exist. We just need to continue those decolonial politics, and that's necessary. The second is just again the 1NR loss in evidence that like the hegemonic order will always inevitably cause transition wars, and the alternative is the only way to doing this. I think like the AF can win so the AF is winning the F probably can win like conflict is inevitable. It just needs a linkage, just like why those things do happen or something like that, and like crackdowns, etc., whatnot, or just like why like the alternative just doesn't solve regardless because of something else. And that was like I just framed this really as a debate. It's like I really framed this debate as like a counterplan with a disset of like its renewables are just bad at the end of the day. So I was like, okay, is there a solvency deficit to the alternative? I didn't think so at all, and I thought like the net benefit just like this set of like renewable extraction just like impact turn like everything. I wish from the neg there was like a tiebreaker of like structural violence to like really like break that, but like that's probably, I mean, well, Kevin will probably like have a disagreement with me. It's just easier for me to like probably do some impact calc or differentiation between those things, but I think like the strategy was like fine, whatnot. Otherwise, I think like a concession like the Croker evidence is like makes it hard for me to like resolve any like the cooperation arguments. I think like the AF is like, I think the neg's kind of right, like our cards are like speculative about these things, and like the AF is just like trying to like push back into those things. But like I think Croker's is like a uniqueness issue that like, really takes out all those arguments that like make sure like cooperation can never happen and never transition wars are always going to exist. So the alternative is the only way to resolving things, because like decolonial politics are going to be like the best. So yeah.
All right. I voted negative because U.S. investment in renewables causes escalatory wars over rare minerals. So the TLDR of my decision is that I thought alt solvency was very low. I thought AF solvency was low. And I thought the neg was winning a turn that came prior to AF offense. I thought there were two large components to the AF. The first was about US-China cooperation over SDGs, and the second was about the connection between renewables and energy dominance. So starting with the first part about US-China cooperation over SDGs, I concluded that it was unlikely that China would buy into frameworks. The farthest that the AF evidence get is like the line in He about building institutional relationships, or the OECD line about guiding collective action. But I think if you're contending that China will take an extremely active role in targeting this nexus of food, energy, water, setting standards for how much water is used and how efficiently, you just need better evidence that meets the threshold of China says yes. I'm persuaded by the next thesis that there's like an enduring technological war between the US and China as part of projects of imperial expansion. The Croker evidence gives the example of Huawei. And then I think the Lawson evidence also does some work to support the negative thesis about the notion of imperial conflict. Then I got to the second part of the debate about like renewables and energy dominance. I think I might have thought about this a little bit differently than the other judges. I actually think that the AF is like a good and significant claim to solvency here. So like we invest in SDGs, which causes us to develop renewables, and then we use that energy dominance to bolster our own security, which prevents conflict. I think the 2AR is correct in explaining this scenario is kind of isolated from the China says yes, no part of the debate. I think the issue is that the negative is forwarded to a prior question about resource wars happening between the US and China over the minerals necessary for those renewables in the first place. So to me, the most persuasive moment of the 2NR is like this linear timeline argument, which I think they should have blown up more, which is essentially that the AF has impacts about the benefits of the US having renewables, but the negative is reading a much more immediate turn about war in the process of acquiring those minerals. So like the negative is reading like the Ramodi evidence about disputes over mineral acquisition, the Gupta evidence about each country having vested interest, and then they even have like this terminal impact Robinson card about how that then drives nuclear wars. The pushback from the AF is like whether or not we would actually mine for those minerals in the first place. The farthest you get is this recycling argument. And I looked at the cards and I just didn't think that they were particularly great. Like the Yoti card has one line that's like, maybe we can satisfy the day-by-day demand for minerals with recycling. But it's one line. I thought the negative cards were better. And I think you need more explanation for why that wouldn't entail inevitable resource conflicts between the US and other actors. The alternative, I was kind of terminally unpersuaded by the alternative. So putting everything aside with reciprocity, like the Uyghurs are in re-education camps, how are they going to fight the CCP? Miscellaneous stuff. I thought Nutria had great moments in the debate, and I know this is like a disappointing loss, but it was like a pleasure to see you two in action. And then the second thing was, I think the permutation could have been a strategy in this debate. So like the AF and the alternative are conflicted perhaps ideologically, but not effectually. And so what I mean by that is that you could potentially have the AF resolve some short-term impact and the alternative resolve some longer-term thing. So like have the explanation of the perm double bind, which is like, you know, if the alt can overcome the CCP governmental structures of neoliberal capitalism, they should be able to overcome the AF's SDG framework, and then articulate some short-term impact to the AF. So like maybe the perception of dwindling long-term energy security invites a quick attack from Russia, because they know that even if they escalate in Ukraine, the US is still dependent on them in the long term. The problem in this debate is that your impact ended up being longer term than the one the neg was going for. But if you just had like a short-term thing and you were like the alternative in the long run solves for the sustainability stuff, coupled with an explanation of the perm double bind, I think that could have been potentially persuasive to me.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I think we're good on questions unless MJ has anything. Great debate, y'all. Good luck.
Great debate.
Good debate.